They said beauty was just a look. They were wrong. Welcome to the space where we do not talk about surfaces. We talk about what is underneath them. We talk about the thing that stops a room before a word is spoken. We talk about the kind of presence that walks in ordinary and lands extraordinary. Today, we are talking about what happens when your beauty arrives with something they never saw coming. Not just a face, not just a style, but an authority so quiet, so grounded, so deeply earned through seasons of silence and suffering and private transformation, that the moment you step forward, the moment you open your mouth, the moment you simply exist in full, people freeze. They were not expecting that. They were not prepared for you. And today, we are going to talk about exactly why, exactly how, and exactly what it means for who you are still becoming. Stay with me, because this one is going to hit different. They were not ready for you. They saw you walk in, and something in them shifted, something they could not name, could not explain, could not prepare for, because you did not just enter the room, you arrived. And there is a difference between those two things that most people will never understand. They thought they had you figured out. They thought they knew what you were. They had already placed you in a category, already written the label, already decided what shelf you belonged on. And then you opened your mouth. And then you moved with that quiet certainty. And then you looked at them with those eyes that have seen things, survived things, been broken by things that would have ended most people entirely. And something in them stopped. Something in them said, wait, this is not what I thought it was. You were never just the surface. You were never just the face, the presence, the first impression. You were always the depth beneath it, the architecture behind the appearance, the kind of beauty that does not ask permission and does not apologize and does not dim itself so that smaller eyes can handle the brightness. And they were not ready for that. Most people are not. Because the world has taught people to separate beauty from power, to separate grace from authority, to treat softness and strength as if they are opposites, as if you cannot be both at once, as if the same person who carries themselves with elegance cannot also carry an entire room with their presence alone. But you were never built according to those rules. You were built in the fire. In the quiet years, in the mornings when nobody was watching and you still chose to show up, in the nights when you sat with your own reflection and decided that you were going to become something that could not be ignored, could not be dismissed, could not be filed away in someone else's limited imagination. That is not ordinary. That is not something people just stumble into. That is something you earned. And now they are stunned. Now they are recalibrating. Now they are sitting with the discomfort of realizing that they underestimated you, and that their underestimation says everything about their vision and nothing about your worth. Because you were always this, even when they could not see it, even when you could not fully see it yourself. There was a time, and you know exactly the time I am talking about, when you questioned all of it, when the silence around you felt like a verdict, when the absence of recognition felt like proof that maybe they were right. Maybe you were not as much as you believed. Maybe the thing you carried inside you was just a story you told yourself to survive, not a truth that the world would ever confirm. No. That thought almost had you. That thought almost won. You sat with it. You let it speak. You gave it more time and more space than it deserved. And somewhere in that quiet, somewhere in that season of not being seen, something in you hardened. Not into bitterness, into certainty. There is a kind of growth that only happens when nobody is watching. When the applause is gone and the validation has dried up and you are left alone with the raw material of who you actually are. No performance, no audience, no external reason to continue. Just you and the decision. And you made the decision. You did not collapse. You did not disappear. You did not spend your energy waiting for someone else to give you permission to take up space. You went inward. You went quiet. You worked on the thing that most people never work on because it is not visible, because it does not get likes, because it does not generate applause in the moment you are doing it. You worked on your identity, not your image, not your presentation, your identity, the thing underneath. The thing that holds when everything else breaks. The thing that speaks through you before you ever open your mouth. That communicates itself through the way you walk and the way you pause and the way you look at something and decide whether it deserves your full attention. That is what they felt when you walked in. They did not feel your clothes. They did not feel your history. They did not feel the resume or the credentials or the carefully constructed exterior that anyone with enough effort can construct. They felt you, the actual you, the one that was built in silence, the one that survived, the one that chose over and over again in the dark with no witnesses to become something worth becoming. And it stunned them because they were expecting something ordinary. They were prepared for ordinary. They had their ordinary response already loaded and ready to fire. And then you showed up. Ha ha ha. They had no idea. You see, authority is not loud. Authority does not announce itself. Authority does not need the room to stop talking before it commands attention. Authority simply enters and the room adjusts. That is what you have developed. Not arrogance, not performance, not the hollow confidence of someone who has never been truly tested, but the quiet, immovable authority of someone who has been through the process, who has stood at the bottom of a very deep and very dark place and looked up and chosen to climb. That kind of authority cannot be faked. It cannot be purchased. It cannot be borrowed from someone else, or mimicked by watching enough videos or reading enough material. It is only forged in real time, in real pain, in real seasons of loss and confusion, and the very human experience of not knowing whether any of it is going to work out. You went through that, and you came out the other side, carrying something that people can feel before they can name it. Well, that is the thing about genuine transformation. It radiates. It does not need a stage. It does not need an introduction. It does not need the setup. It simply is. And you simply are. But let us go deeper, because I do not want to just speak about where you are now. I want to speak about what it cost. Because too many people look at someone who has arrived at this place and assume the ease. They assume the confidence was always there. They assume the authority was inherited. They assume the beauty. And I am talking about the kind of beauty that stops people in the middle of their sentence, was just something you were given. They do not see the cost. They do not see the mornings you got up, when your spirit was low and your direction was unclear, and the work felt like it was taking forever to become anything visible. They do not see the days you stayed quiet, when everything in you wanted to defend yourself, to explain yourself, to beg someone to understand you. They do not see the seasons you spent rebuilding beliefs about yourself that had been broken by disappointment and exposure, and the particular cruelty of being misread by people you trusted. That is invisible work, the most important kind. Because that is the work that changes the structure of a person. Not the surface, not the external, the deep interior structure. The part of you that decides on the cellular level, what you believe you deserve, what you believe you are capable of, what you believe is possible for someone who looks like you and comes from where you come from and carries what you carry. You did that work. Nah, you did not just do that work. You refused to stop doing it even when results were slow. Even when the evidence of your transformation was not yet visible to anyone else. Even when you were carrying a version of yourself that the world had not yet caught up to. You kept going. And now they are stunned. Now they are standing in the presence of the result of all those invisible decisions, all those private declarations, all those mornings and evenings and seasons of unrewarded effort, and they are experiencing something they cannot fully articulate. They are experiencing the weight of someone who knows who they are. Do you understand how rare that is? Do you understand how few people in any given room at any given time actually, genuinely, deeply know who they are? Not what they do, not what they have achieved, not what others say about them, but who they are at the foundation. What they stand for when standing costs something. What they will not compromise when compromise would be easier and safer and less expensive in the short term. Most people spend their entire lives performing a version of themselves and calling it identity. Most people are still waiting for someone else to tell them who they are. Most people are still outsourcing their self-definition to the loudest voices in their immediate environment. You stopped doing that. And the moment you stopped, everything shifted. Because when you stopped needing the room to confirm you, the room started responding to you differently. When you stopped adjusting yourself to fit smaller expectations, you started occupying more of your actual space. When you stopped apologizing for the fullness of who you are, the fullness of who you are became undeniable. That is the authority they are responding to. Not dominance, not aggression, not the desperate energy of someone trying to prove themselves, the grounded, settled, unmovable energy of someone who has already decided, who has already had the conversation with themselves, who has already looked at the full picture. The strengths and the flaws and the history and the wounds and the gifts and the confusion, and said, yes, all of it. I claim all of it. I am not running from any of it. I am not ashamed of any of it. I am not diminishing any of it to make someone else comfortable. This is me, fully. And that is what stops people. That is what catches people off guard. That is what creates that moment of stunned silence, when someone is expecting one thing and you deliver something else entirely, something richer, something more complex. Something that cannot be dismissed or categorized or placed in the small boxes they had prepared for you. Wow. You are not what they planned for. You are the version of yourself that plans were not big enough to contain. And I want you to sit with that for a moment. Because we live in a world that will constantly try to reduce you, constantly try to put you back in the manageable box, constantly try to remind you of who you used to be as a way of limiting who you are becoming. People are more comfortable with a version of you they understand, a version of you that stays predictable, a version of you that does not force them to expand their own perception of what is possible. Your growth makes them uncomfortable. Your authority makes them recalibrate. Your beauty, the kind that comes with intelligence and depth and discipline and a history of choosing yourself, even when it was hard. That kind of beauty unsettles people who are only prepared to engage with the surface. And that discomfort is not your problem to solve. You are not responsible for managing someone else's unpreparedness for you. You are not responsible for shrinking so that the people who limited their own imagination can feel comfortable in your presence. You are only responsible for being fully what you are, for continuing the work, for maintaining the standard you have set for yourself in the private seasons that the public never saw. Because here is the truth about where you are now. This is not the peak. This is not the arrival. This is the beginning of what happens when someone has done the inner work and now steps into the outer world, carrying the full weight of who they have become. The best of you has not even been seen yet. What they were stunned by today is only the introduction, only the opening note, only the first sentence of something that is going to take a very long time to fully unfold, and that is going to continue to stun, continue to move, continue to demand that people around you expand their understanding of what a human being can become through commitment and suffering and the relentless choice to grow. You are at the beginning of being known, truly known, not for the performance, not for the version of you that learned to survive by being palatable, but for the real thing, the full thing, the thing that has been building in the dark for however long you have been building it. And it is extraordinary, not because it is perfect. Beauty of this kind is never about perfection. It is about wholeness. It is about the integration of every part of your story into something that functions as one coherent, powerful, authentic human being. The struggle did not break you. It became you. The silence did not erase you. It deepened you. The seasons of being unseen did not diminish you. They concentrated you. They took everything scattered and unfocused and distilled it into something potent, something present, something that walks into a room and without a word communicates that there is more here than meets the eye, and that meeting the eye was already more than enough. That is what they felt. That is the thing they could not prepare for. That is the thing no expectation could have accounted for. The fact that the beauty they saw was not just a feature of your presence, but an expression of your becoming. And becoming is never finished. That is the part that should fill you with something quiet and powerful and deeply motivating as you move forward from this moment. The work continues. The growth continues. The commitment to showing up as the fullest version of yourself in every room, in every season, in every moment, when it would be easier to retreat, that continues. And with it, the capacity to stun will only deepen. The authority will only settle further into something unshakable. The beauty, that particular kind that comes from a person who has been through something and emerged, not broken but built, it will only grow more extraordinary. There is something the world does not tell you about the kind of person you are becoming. It does not warn you that arriving in your fullness will unsettle people who are comfortable with your smallness. It does not prepare you for the strange silence that falls when you walk into a space and the energy changes before you have done a single thing. It does not tell you that the stunned look on their face is not confusion. It is recognition. Deep, involuntary, impossible to fake recognitions of someone who has paid a price they cannot see, walked a road they did not travel, and arrived at a place they have not yet reached themselves. That look is not about your appearance alone. It never was. It is about the convergence, the rare, almost impossible convergence of outer presence and inner depth arriving together in one moment, in one person, without warning and without apology. That is you. That has always been you. Even in the seasons when you could not see it. Even in the years when the world around you was too busy, too distracted, too small in its vision to recognize what was standing right in front of it. You were always this convergence, and now the world is beginning to catch up. Well, it took long enough, but here you are, not angry about the wait, not bitter about the years, not carrying the weight of every person who looked past you or looked through you or decided without evidence that you were less than what you were. You dropped that weight somewhere on the road. You had to, because you cannot carry that and carry this at the same time. You cannot hold on to the evidence of their blindness and simultaneously step into the fullness of your own vision. At some point, you had to choose. At some point, you had to decide that your energy was too valuable, your time too sacred, your becoming too important to spend any more of it on the grief of being underestimated. So you let it go. And in the letting go, something extraordinary happened.